Hey, what's up? What's going on, everybody? It's Super Dave back again with another episode of the PA Political Revolution Podcast, where we believe that you have to have a revolutionary mind frame if you want to get some things done and change the actual status quo that's going on in politics today. But right now, I have a special guest. We have a brother by the name of Christian Manuel. He's going to be running for Mr. Joe Deshotel seat. And brother, can you give I can only give a half-hearted explanation. I mean, a half-hearted introduction. I believe you can do a better introduction yourself. Can you go ahead and let everybody know who you are and what do you do?
Sure. Thank you so much for doing this with me. My name is Christian Manuel. I was born here in the Jefferson County area at Mid Jefferson, and my father was in the Coast Guard, so I've been back and forth. But mainly, I've gone to every level of school here in Port Arthur, from Sam Houston
Mm,
to Edison to Lincoln before Lincoln was no longer a high school.
right.
And then finally in 2004, Memorial High School, I graduated from there. And my first job, actually, I was a survey. I would ask people to do surveys in Central Mall
Okay, I think
for
I
about, yeah, for about 8 months. It used to be next to where Sears is, and it's not there anymore. And then I moved to Austin. I was going to school at Houston Tillotson for a while, and that's where I had started to work for Representative Deshotel. I started with him October the 1st of 2004. And I've honestly, I've been with him ever since then. I've never left him. So yeah.
okay, great, great. Now tell me what positions that you have. I was doing a little bit of information searching, right, and I seen that you had a few positions with Mr. Joe Deshotel. I think I seen one on I think it was 12 News Now. They had something on you. What are some of the
Yes.
positions that you actually worked with Joe Deshotel? Right, what's the position titles and what does that include?
So the very first position I ever had would be considered a caseworker slash legislative aide,
Right,
and that was honestly, truthfully, that was literally just answering the phones. That was making sure he got his messages, courier, and then I would do casework, which is and casework, to be long story short, is basically if people have any kind of problems with any state agencies. I know a lot of times people don't know who to call, but that's where, for one instance, your state representative's office and state representative comes in. So I started off doing that, and then I was a legislative aide, which is almost basically the same as a caseworker. It's just legislative aide is a fancier title that they keep you around a little bit longer than they would.
right. You're a little bit
And
closer
then,
to him.
right, you're a little bit closer to them. And then from there, I became his what we would consider a district director, or your kind of like what you would think of as your assistant manager. I made sure all the casework was being done. Made sure that if there were events he needed to go to, that they were in the schedule, anything of that sort that would go through from there. And then finally, I became his chief of staff, and I've been his chief of staff now for about 10 years now. Um, and the chief of staff, I always tell people, honestly, it's like, the best way to say it is the assistant manager who is always in the office, who has to manage themselves, the office, and the member, because
Right.
you have to make sure that the member is getting all the information and getting it correctly, and as far as bills. And then you also have to make sure that you have a legislative director, sometimes you have committee coordinators, and your committee coordinators or committee clerks are going to be people who, if you are if your member sits on a committee, which Representative Deshotel has for quite a number of sessions, your committee clerk is the one who makes sure staffs your committee and makes sure that all of the meetings go procedurally correct. And so the chief, really, for the most part, is the person who makes sure that everything is set, so when they get into the office or they get to their meeting or to any committee hearing, that all of the information that they need is before them for votes on the floor, anything such as that.
Okay, great, great. Now, for most people like myself, right, don't
Mhm.
that doesn't actually know what a or the state representative does, can you pretty much give us like some of the job duties and And what do they actually do for? Yeah, what do they actually do for for the area like Port Arthur, Beaumont, Jefferson County, and how far
Mhm.
is their range? Is it county, citywide? What's their jurisdiction?
So it is a when it goes to their jurisdiction, every state representative and every state senator, they basically are elected by their district, and there are two types of bills. There are what we consider, well, they're actually a little bit more, but there's two types of bills mainly, which are bills that affect the entire state, and then there are bills that only affect your local area. So anything that will affect statewide, that would just be considered a general bill. If it only affects Port Arthur, if it only affects Beaumont, if it or even sometimes in just certain areas, those are considered local bills and they have a separate calendar. But what a state representative does is in a very as I say, easy to manage way to think of it is a state representative is supposed to be the person who is the in between guy for the federal government and the local government. And a state representative, all state representatives in Texas are part time. They're not full time legislators. A lot of people don't know that state representatives are part time.
Right.
Um, they only get paid $600 every month. They do get per diem when they go to Austin, but when they're not in a legislative session, pretty much they're basically responsible for having a job. So that can kind of take it, you know, it makes it difficult for a lot of people, which a lot of people have said, unfortunately, we should consider changing it. But that's one thing. But a state representative is someone who makes sure, for instance, food stamps. The money does come from the federal government,
Hmm.
but the state then will take that money and they have to follow federal guidelines, but as long as they follow certain federal guidelines, they make sure which places money is supposed to go to which agencies, and then it trickles down. The same thing when it comes to any state school, from colleges to your local schools. Basically, they're also over finding out and kind of in a way negotiating and fighting on who's going to get what in what area. And it all anything that deals state related, as far as tech stock, as far as in
Okay.
any kind of housing, child support, state taxes, anything of that sort, state voting rights. We create these bills that basically everyone, once they're passed, that they're governed by. And then of course they can't go over what the federal government says, but they're really the kind of like, it's a great seat, but really and truly they're supposed to be the person who your local area are supposed to be able to be more accessible to them, because of the fact they affect so much from how much money your schools are getting, how much money your cities are getting, and then that'll trickle down when you have your school board and your city council that can do more with those tax dollars, is how it's kind of supposed to trickle down, as we're of course with like county judges and people like that.
Okay. Okay. So, and earlier you kind of gave a great point that I want to kind of expound on. Right. You said as a caseworker, you was working
Hmm.
as a caseworker that you had some type, you helped out some of the citizens, right? You citizens
Yes,
went to
sir.
the state representative to file some cases or some things. What types of things that citizen, such as myself, can come to a state representative and get help with?
Sure. So just to kind of give a few, so of course one would be, um, for instance, when we were going through the pandemic, or whenever there's hurricane relief, people who need emergency food stamps, or when people are on unemployment, and they're saying, which we know unfortunately does happen, when people are saying, I've been calling these people, they're not answering, or you get someone who, sometimes it's unfortunate, but they can be a little rude to people, or they don't get back with you in time. And, people need these kind of services. A state representative, as far as casework, what I did, what staff mainly does, is we're able to call what is called our ombudsman part of the office, and we're able to ask them to basically investigate. And as I tell people, when we make a call, it sends a notice to a supervisor, then it sends it to the supervisor who's below that person, and then to the caseworker who's supposed to be working on that case, where it says, hey, a state rep's office is calling, what's going on with this? We need you to explain this, so then we can explain to them legally if you did your job or not. And that's how we're able to sometimes get those things rectified once we're out of a legislative session, or even when we are in a legislative session. So a state representative's office is for sure like caseworkers. Even as far as in prison transfers, we know that, you know, whether a person, at least in the rep's office and me personally, whether a person is incarcerated or not has nothing to do with them being a human.
Right.
Sometimes if people are there and we know it happens, they're being abused by guards, or there's unfair treatment, or sometimes you have instances where someone's child is incarcerated and, you know, they live here, but they're incarcerated all the way in El Paso. We're able to find out if there's ways that we can move them closer. And it all is based upon whatever the law allows us to do, as far as in different procedures and steps if the person qualifies. But we do things like that, which, you know, for a lot of people, if you live in Port Arthur, it'll be a little bit easier for you to drive to maybe right outside of Houston in the Katy area. But if you have to drive to El Paso, that puts families on edge, because if something happens, you got to go 12 hours to check on your child.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. And so we try to make sure that we do certain things if we're able to do it through the law. And so, and really and truly, anything that's state related, as far as if people have grievances.
Hold on
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, hold on. I just want to interject this for a second. Let me go ahead and get this straight. So say for instance, I have like a brother, uncle, mother, father, son, anybody that's locked up in prison, right? And they're saying they're getting beat up, they're getting abused, they're not feeding them, they're starving them for whatever reason. I can come to my state representative, try to file a case with a caseworker, and that representative can kind of look into that situation for me. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. So there's multiple
state jail, right?
Yes, sir. State jail. What basically happens in a short range is, some people already have family members set up that basically can act as an intermediate, and sometimes we had to get permission. But basically, let's say, for instance, I have a brother that is incarcerated, and while he's there incarcerated, he's saying that he's being, you know, picked on by a guard, and, you know, they broke his leg, and he files a grievance against that guard. I then can say, I need you to file this grievance first, or even the family member who is authorized can file a grievance.
Right.
And then once that grievance goes through the process, once it's in there and then there's a decision made, we can thus step in and say, okay, explain to us where this is going, what steps does the family or the inmate need to do in order to get this rectified. Even if it's something as far as in discipline, and they're feeling like they're being unjustly disciplined, we can say, well, these are the steps that we need you to do. And then we can ask the state to refer us to these sorts of questions and tell us legally what the law allows. And a lot of times that actually helps state representatives to create laws, because that's how you're able to find the problem. So if you call and they give you an answer and you say, wait a second, that doesn't even seem right. How do you do that to a person? Or how come this person can't, you know, get this amount when they're only making $5 above the poverty line? Why can't they get additional food stamps? And then that gives us flexibility to try to change that law a lot of times, because casework actually is a very good indicator for what kind of laws we should be passing as well.
Right, yeah, because it's a representative of what the citizens are complaining about. Okay,
yes, sir.
Great answer, right? Say, for instance, right, I have issue with child support, right? Say I have a child's mother, or you know, women have issues with the child's father, right? What's some of the things that you've seen that comes through the office, and maybe have come through Mr. Deshotel's office or somebody else's office, that y'all can kind of help me with, or help anybody with in dealing with the child support system? They feel they're being done wrong.
So especially in cases like that, and I've had it happen on both ends. I've had mothers and fathers and boyfriends and girlfriends who, you know, I haven't received a payment, or they've taken this much out, or why am I still paying? What we can do, and it all depends on the case. And I tell people there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of time, especially when it comes to child support, the reason that it can sometimes be very difficult, and I understand why people get frustrated, is because every case is different based upon, to an extent, what the judgment is. So for instance, you'll have some
Right.
people who will say, which I know a lot of people like to talk about, is that they will sit up there and they will say, well, this is unfair that I know he's making more money and he's not paying his child support and he's not doing this, and which happens, but the state then can always find out later on how much a parent is making. Now, personally, I think regardless of who has the child, I think that there's some ways that we should be tightening up these reporting, because for one, whether you're the custodial or non-custodial parent, the child always ends up suffering. And I know sometimes it can be difficult to have a separation of a relationship, and sometimes it can just exacerbate those feelings.
Right.
But there's ways that we need to make sure that they can be tightened up for the sake of the child.
Absolutely.
And what some people don't realize is, for instance, I can give you this, that if you have a child, a lot of people think, well, the child turns 18 and I'm done with it.
Yes.
Well, that's really not always the case, because sometimes a child will fail a grade and they will have to continue until they're 19, and then
Right.
the parent could still be responsible for that as well. What a lot of people think is, they say, well, there's no way that's my child. I never slept with her, or any of those kinds of situations. I always tell people, please show up. You don't want to not show up,
Right. Right. Yeah.
because that can make you a parent in de facto, and that can be very hard to undo. So when it comes to child support, it really can be tricky, but it all really depends on what is going on with that person and why they're in the situation they're in. And it's hard to sometimes give a general answer, because you can literally talk to two people with the same judgment, but when you go to it, they'll say, well, he's paying this because he missed the payment.
Right.
And then
Right.
one person, they'll say he's paying way lower than this person, but that's because he gives all of his tax refund to the child support. So he's paid
Oh
so
yeah.
much
Yeah.
in advance that it just keeps lowering that person's payment. So
Okay.
everything can always be different.
Okay. Now go ahead and tell me this. Right. Now you came up with another great point. Say for instance, like somebody claims that I'm the child's father, right? I
Mhm.
missed the court date for whatever, right? And then I happen to be a father by de facto. But later on, I say, hey, we go and do a DNA test. It shows that I'm not the father, right? Or
Mhm.
any other similar case where they have
And
been
you're
putting
still
on
stuck
child
with child
support,
support.
right? Now I'm
Yes.
shown that I have a DNA test saying that I'm not the father, but I'm still stuck with child support. How do y'all handle that? That's something that we can come to y'all for, right?
So in reality, no, because once a ruling is made by a judge, it thus comes out of the hands, which is weird because the legislator grants that authority to a judge. But
Right.
once a judge makes a judgment, then it is a judgment that is where is the problem, and then that's where we come into which I think a lot of us do know. Judges have an extreme amount of power in a
Right.
lot
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
Not that they can't be undone, but it's legislations can move faster than a judge will, in certain cases. And in cases like that, um, it really ends up coming to where you would have to get an attorney, or you have to just continuously plead with the court to give you a hearing and ask the judge to accept that paternity test uh,
Right.
in one of those kinds of situations. And
Okay.
also, just for some people, because I've gotten this answer, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to sign this agreement saying, or get this person to sign an agreement saying they won't put me on child support.
Yeah.
But if the other parent ends up ever getting on any kind of public assistance that the state ends up having to kick in,
Oh.
they
Right.
will come to you and they can ask you, well, since they're now on public assistance, we now need you to start paying child support in this amount. And a
Right.
lot of people are like, wait, I'm not even, I don't have anything to do with the child, or, we're not on all of these different things can factor in, and it can be, it can make people feel very stressful. And really and truly, that's what we're here for. In those instances where it's a state situation, we find out what the law states, and then we can say, okay, yes, sir, you can do this, or no, sir, how the law is still right now based on the law, the state has to do this unless the law is changed to do that.
Okay. Okay, great. I was also looking online for different things about state representatives, and I found something that says like the representatives may also assist in constituents with personal legal issues such as immigration and justice problems. Right. I want you to. Can
Mhm.
you give me an example of some justice problems that you may have been that you may have seen through Mr. Deshotel's office or somebody else's office that you know that a state representative handles?
Well, yes, they have a couple of attorneys who do some immigration reform. So even though immigration is basically a federal situation, you can still be hired. And they have some state reps, like one is Gene Wu out of Houston. He does a lot of immigration stuff, or he puts people in contact with immigration attorneys. And when it comes to putting or representing someone in a legal capacity, they have that right for sure if you're an attorney, because there are a lot of attorneys within the legislature. Sometimes people try to be careful with it, because it is also a gray area that some people feel that it could be like taking advantage of the system. So some people will do it if that's what law they practice. Some people, they won't do it. We've had members who kind of gotten in trouble for kind of using their state repness in a capacity. And then you have some members, like Representative Deshotel, he strictly just did title law when he was doing all of his stuff. So he would just do closings on houses. And I know there were times where people would need a close on a house, and he would waive his fee as the legal representative, so that they wouldn't have to pay whatever the fee was for that person. And they have a right to do those kinds of things because of the fact that they are part-time legislators.
Okay. Okay, cool. It's interesting. Now, if now, where actually is the representative office located? Is it in Port Arthur or Beaumont?
It's in Port Arthur. Yes, it is where the old Park Place Hospital used to be. It's
Okay,
the
right.
address is One Plaza Square, and it's Suite 203. And then the second office is in Austin.
Okay, okay. Say for instance, if I come to the office, is there a lot of information, a lot of literature that y'all may have in the office about state representatives?
No, we actually don't have any. Well, and let me rephrase that. We do when we have had tours come, or we have had people come to the office. But for the most part, we're always there, whether like during COVID, even if when we were basically not in the office, we're just there to answer whatever questions we needed to. It was one of those things where we were there. If we weren't there, we were at an event. We would always call people back. And honestly, I would say for my 17 years, I've only probably received 3 calls where people say, "What does he actually do?" Most people think he's a congressman,
Right, right,
or they think he's a senator, or
right. Yeah, yeah.
they, that's pretty much most people don't know what a state representative is.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. And tell me what actually is the path of coming towards a state representative? Like, tell me how normal people kind of come to the realization that, hey, I want to be a state representative. Do they put time on city council, county commissioner? Is there any other form of politics that seems to get you ready for being a state rep? Can you go ahead and kind of explain what's the usual footsteps or the usual pathway as far as being a rep?
So I will say, when it comes to that, you do have a lot of people who were once mayors, um, people who were once city council, not a whole lot of them, but you do, it all really depends on the person. Everyone has had a different step of how they've done it. Because like, for instance, Jasmine Crockett, she was, she's an attorney, and I think she was a party chair at one point, but she did the party chair, and then she was doing all of her legal work, and she has a good understanding of the law. And then she was able to come to and rise to being a state representative, and now she's running for Congress. So really and truly, for everybody, it's different. You have people who have, we had a member who had only had their GED, and we have members who are doctors, who all they've ever done is do surgeries and do medical, and they never really did a whole lot other than that. And it all depends, because I will tell people, the one thing is, legislating is completely different from any other form of government that's on a local level, because of the fact that while cities will pass ordinances, and all that, legislating is, no matter what anyone wants to say, I always joke and say, unless you know how to legislate, or you really worked in the field, legislating is a completely different beast on its own, because you do have people who come there, and having an understanding of the law actually does not help people. A lot of people think that. It's a really good indication, where you can read a bill and you can understand it easier for a lot of attorneys. But you have a lot of attorneys who are there sometimes for anywhere between 2 to 6 years, who cannot pass legislation because it's so difficult. It's just such a different beast to just get up the hill, and that's just on the side of the House. And then the Senate is a completely different point of view.
Okay, you're talking about the state Senate, right? In the state House, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think you said, like, some people kind of get it confused with the federal Senate, the House of Representatives. Yeah. Okay, right. And and tell me, what does it mean when the legislative is in session? Tell us what's going on, what's happening when the legislature's in session and out of session. Tell us about that, please.
Sure. So the Texas legislature goes in every odd year. They go in for 140 days there, and the fascinating thing that a lot of people don't know is the only thing that there's two things we're mandated to do, which is to pass a budget and to balance our budget. Texas has to have a balanced budget.
Right.
We cannot leave without it being balanced. And the only bill that we're obligated to do is the appropriations of state dollars. Everything else doesn't matter at the end of the day. We don't have to do anything by constitution. But for 140 days, every odd year, so the next time will be January 2023, and it's the second Tuesday of that January is when they go into session, and it's 140 days. And it's also very interesting because the first about 60 days, you're really not able to do a whole lot, because you can't have committee assignments for a certain amount of days. And then when you finally get committee assignments, then it's normally about February, things start kind of kicking off, maybe middle of February, March. And then when March comes, you normally have, depending on when you've gotten started, you have about 30 to 40 days to hurry up and get as much as you can get done before you hit another deadline. And then you hit another deadline, the procedure is supposed to be extremely hard to get things done. Now, we know when people want to get things done, they'll get things done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when they have the numbers. But like this session, they only passed 666 bills, and I think there were about 4,000 to 5,000 and some bills that were filed just from my understanding, the House side alone. But for that 140 days, really and truly, it's all about getting your legislation written, making sure you file your bills, making sure you can try to get committee hearings, that you can fix problems that you have during the process, and then you just move on, and then you get to the Senate and you do the same thing. And then after session is done, basically the legislator is off for 18 months unless the governor calls us for a special session. Okay. Which is only for 30 days at a time. And every time there's a special session, it costs about $1 million a day to have a special session, which is why when there was the voting rights break they try to use that saying, well, they're wasting taxpayer dollars because they're trying to do this. And a lot of the Democrats were saying, well, you can always cancel this session. You don't have to go the full 30 days. And, they just refused to. But that's how all of that happens. So every time the legislator goes into effect, that is when your tax dollars are being used for the legislative part of it and for the members mainly. And then after that, for those 18 months, a member is, and that's one reason they have staff, is that's where the staff will come in. And a lot of times they are there to, go to events with the member. But since that member still has to have a job, that staff is there to do casework, to do constituent outreach, things of that sort during work hours when a lot of these people are trying to make a living to live until they can go back.
Right. Okay, so you say they make actually Texas reps make $600 a month?
$600 a month, $7,200 a year, and their per diem when they're there is $221 a day. So it's not in Congress where you're making 170, almost 200. You really don't make money as a state legislator.
Yeah.
You have to have that secondary income unless you have
absolutely.
a retirement. So yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Wow, very educational. Now tell me what made you want to be a state rep? Did you always want to be it after working with Joe Deshotel? I know a lot of times, your people probably get the fever after working with somebody in it. Was that always your plan, working with Mr. Deshotel?
People really sometimes they don't believe it, but especially in the legislature, people know I have always run from elected office. Always. Christian, you want to run for something? I said I would rather chase dogs with the dog catcher than run for office.
Wow.
Because for me, honestly, I have always been the person in the background, and I love it because it has given me the ability to move and do things that, like in the legislature, that sometimes members themselves can't do because people are always watching them. So I'll just give you an example. One time I was trying to get a bill passed, and we had literally 20 days left to the end of session. And I was like, we have got to get this out today. And he was like, I keep talking to this person. I said, talk to them. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And while he's working with one person, I was able to hit a committee office. I was able to hit another member's office and a state senator's office. And when he said, okay, we're voting the bill out right now, I said, okay, I talked to this senator. I talked to this rep. They don't have a problem with it. If you can get this on the floor by tomorrow, we can get it out tomorrow. And they're going to vote it out, and then we'll have it. And we got the bill passed. It was a bill to help protect shelters, specifically shelters for family violence, to basically to make their places confidential. And so by doing that, so if someone got mad, for instance, and gave the layout and someone got hurt, that person could be responsible for like $1,000 fine. But basically, I was able to get more done as a staff person than he was able to do at one time because he still had to vote on bills and he had to talk. And I really enjoyed that. But for me, what really kind of opened my eyes was my family has always been political, and I've always, even like when I would be on summer vacation, I would always want to intern in someone's office because I loved it. I think I wish more people were like you, where they wanted to engage themselves in government, because I always tell people, in my opinion, the two most important things in the world are religion and politics. I say because religion influences your politics, and politics determines what you can do, when you can do it, where you can do it, and if you can do it, no matter where you go in the entire universe. Even if there's an absence of religion or politics, it's still going to determine how you govern yourself. And if you can watch programs on your television show. So I've always really loved government, but what really changed my mind was when he basically said, I'm going to retire. I'm putting out this letter today. Are you still stuck on not running? And I said, well, I don't really want to. I said, I kind of like being a staffer. And he said, but Christian, he said, you know the process better than members. You've helped members get their offices out the ground. You've helped their chief of staffs. He was like, Jefferson County needs someone who's going to be able to go in and pass legislation, because if not, then the only representative we have is the speaker. And we obviously know that those interests are, Republican interests are going to be taken care of. And then you're going to have the last blue, which a lot of people don't realize, this is the last and only blue Democratic county in East Texas. But most importantly, Jefferson County is the only minority protected district that's recognized that has a majority minority African American that's not in an urban area in the entire state of Texas. There's one that should have been created in Killeen, but they cut the county up during redistricting, and it just formed. But right now, we are the only area that's still recognized as having enough Black people that's not in a city setting. And I was like, you know what? He's right. I know the job. I've done the job. The only thing I haven't ever done is sit down on the floor and vote. I've done everything else. I've done the amendments. And I was like, you know what? This is an opportunity that I need to make, not just for the area, but to just take me out of my comfort zone. Because, you know, they say if you never grow, then you're never learn. And I'm trying to grow myself, and I know it's something that I can do. So I felt this is the time. If it was county judge, if it was something else, I would tell people, I'm gonna go work for the city pound. I'm going to work for the city pound because I don't know that job. But I started to tell people, I grew up in the Texas House of Representatives from 18 to 36. That's my house. I know it better than a lot of people. So that's, besides my family, that was what it is that, and also, as cheesy as it sounds, I really do like helping people. And I love my area. And so that's really what it boiled down to for me.
Okay. So to make it clear, Mr. Joe Deshotel endorses you as his successor, right? If he had a say in it, right?
Yes, sir. He has endorsed me, and he will be endorsing me. But of course, it's up to the people to decide who they want.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And thank God we don't live in a system where you just your predecessor picks you.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes, I would never. I'll say this as a young Black man who's still growing to become a man. It's been an honor to have someone train me and raise me from a boy. When you're 18, you think you're a man and you got to learn. From a young boy, and to teach me things that, as I tell people, some people are clawing and fighting to get into that building. And it was 2 sessions ago, for the first time ever, we had 13 Black chief of staffs out of 170 some years of Texas being a state. The first time ever we had 13 Black chief of staffs at one time in the building working for a different array of members. It was a beautiful experience, but it was also sad that out of 181 seats in both chambers together, there's only 13 of us. And Texas has more Black people than any other state in the country. It weighs heavy on you, the responsibility, but it also is a joyful thing, saying it's still our responsibility to continue to help people like us to be able to make better decisions by making better legislation. And that's another reason that I did want to run, because I want to do things to let people know that there are systemic issues, from government to education to policing, and we can't just have legislators saying what they're supposed to do. We need to make sure that we're doing things like people like you talking to you and saying, tell us what you're seeing that we're not seeing. Let's try to see if we can find some midway to do that. And it's just really important, I think, to do that.
Right. Okay, good. Appreciate that. What are some of the best bills that you've seen Mr. Deshotel have actually gotten passed through that particularly helps the Port Arthur area?
Ooh, okay, let me think of.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of some of my top 10. We've done a lot, like for one, when we did the flood mitigation, which was to do a lot of the deepening and widening and to try to help with that, so that hopefully when we get more storms, it won't be as much flooding.
Was that the widening there was a widening where at again? I remember hearing
like up there, like in the Conroe, Houston area, where all of the rivers basically come down from here.
Okay.
Also, he was a part of helping pass the education reform, which was kind of changing some of the tax codes. I know some people, the one that recently passed, not this session, the one before, where they were able to give incentives to teachers to say, not mandate they work overtime, but say, hey, if you want to work overtime, here's bonuses and different incentives that we can give. Now, of course, COVID kicked in, and then we weren't really able to implement any of that. The shelter one was one that is, for me, was near and dear to my heart, just because of the fact that we know that, especially when it comes to Black and brown women, they are assaulted and then they're left without resources.
Right.
And anything I think that we can do to protect people like that is something for me that is wonderful. This bill didn't pass, and it was unfortunate. It came to politics, but one bill was the ban the box, and that's something that I know for sure that if God willing, if I'm able to win, I would love to do it. It basically says that you can ask that person if they were convicted of a crime, but once they get to like the second or third interview, because normally when you ask them for a second or third interview, the person will get the job.
Right.
But also, some people won't even interview the best candidate because when they were 18, they had a silly possession charge,
Right.
and now they're 30-something. They've never committed any crimes again. And then you just kind of like, what's going on? And also, one that we had attached to that was also to basically say that if it was a crime such as, let's say, possession, and you've never done it again, and it's been over 10 years, it'll kind of fall 7 years, it'll fall off of
Right.
basically the record for you having to report it, because it's insane to ask somebody 20 years later if they've been convicted and they've never done stuff like that again. But for me, one of the successes is that we were finally able to get the business community the last 2 sessions to understand and agree with us that this was the best thing for business in Texas. And that was really great. I mean, it took a lot of hard work to really get them to understand, but we were able to get them to do that. God, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of all of the bills that we've done. Some people don't like it, some people do, but at least with the game rooms, I know that can be controversial, but to have a bill that was basically kind of statewide instead, the bill initially was only supposed to be for our area, but it ended up becoming a statewide bill, and that was one we were proud of, because for us it was more of, we just kind of felt like sometimes it was preying on people in their most vulnerable places. And it was also hard for law enforcement. And just to go off of that, if your law enforcement is having to go places and people already have a preconceived notion of law enforcement, if we can also not make every interaction with law enforcement where people feel that it's going to be aggressive, I thought personally that was something good to try to help heal. I know it's not a lot, but just, anytime you can try to diffuse some situations, that was also another reason that we really helped push with that. But there's a lot that we filed, and I don't have them in front of me. I apologize, but there's been
there's no problem. There's no problem.
Different bills that we've tried to do, and that made me very proud.
Yeah, hold on. Let me try to go ahead and interject on that point for a second before I forget, because I already remember another question I wanted to ask you too. But there's some particular on that the game room bill, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that was kind of get people, more comfortable with the gambling situation. But tell me, I remember that I remember seeing on the news that Mr. Deshotel was going to do something with the casino gambling. He was going to try to get it back over here. Tell me tell me a little bit more information about that situation and what Mr. Deshotel was trying to do.
So what that bill was trying to do was basically say that you can only have gambling it was in our area, Houston, San Antonio, Corpus Christi, and there was one other city, and I apologize, it's not popping in my head. Houston, it was basically any place with a waterway. It was on these coasts, but it was only these places. And what it did was it allowed us to have gambling, to have gambling in Port Arthur. And then from there, what would have happened is the money that the state would have basically gotten from it would have gone straight to TWIA. So then that way, because of the fact of how TWIA's insurance just keeps going up, and TWIA keeps saying, if we get hit with another big storm.
Oh, and TWIA, that's what Texas Windstorm Agency?
Texas Windstorm, yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
And you know, that they've always kind of teetered on if they even have enough money to pay.
Oh, yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like,
they always, yeah.
Right, and it's like, well, you tell me to pay it, but then you say you might not have enough money, explain it. Or they say, make it make sense.
Yeah, you need to find the money, yeah.
Right, you need to find the money. And so what that bill was going to do would have been to allow all of that resources, so we would get the tax dollars in the area, everything else, plus on top of that, then all of the money that we know that we lose to other states would have gone straight into the TWIA program. So then you would have had a lot less price increase, actually would have gone down, because you would have continuously had a flow of money that was coming in that was going to subsidize that program, excuse me.
Yeah, that sounds good. That bill on the surface sounds good. That sounds very good. Yes,
and there were a lot of people. The problem where it came into is that outside interests are have killed that bill, and they just don't want to lose the money that they could get from other places. Now, they know that gambling is going to come to Texas eventually, and now they're trying to get into that mold, and we have to make sure that we stay vigilant to make sure that our community isn't left out. And that's what we were trying to do with that, is say, hey, let's put these in the areas where people are suffering the most, not just economically, but also because of natural disasters.
Right, and also from my personal, my opinion, right? It has the special interest on both sides, because we in my opinion, right, we had some. I ain't gonna go into them a lot, because we had some issues because we're dealing with council people, city managers that thought gambling was going to come down here, and they kind of did a lot of things to mess up the city, right? So you can have both. You can have the interest on both sides, and some of those interests cannot necessarily be in good, as what the bill was for. What you said the bill was for, right? Which to me sounds good. Like gives making the money off the tax dollars. You give them to the Texas Windstorm, so a lot of the people that have damages, we don't have to go through a whole circus shoot just to get payment for that, and also we don't have to pay those extremely high premiums. Well, hell, we might not even get the service that we're paying for. Yeah, that sounds good, but unfortunately, gambling brings a lot of crooks, right? In my opinion.
Yeah.
Gambling, it brings people with money. Everybody want a quick fix. Everybody want to get rich quick, right? And just like with Las Vegas was built, under the criminal mob element, if I'm, from my brief, history, right? And just with my oversight, right? We had a couple of people. We had a city manager and a police chief that had some quote unquote experience in, reservation gambling, and that just been a whole total collapse of leadership right there. But I'm not going to go into that because we're talking about you right now. So another another question. See, so it's kind of, so you got to manage, man, as being a advocate, or I try to call myself like a bootleg advocate. You have to try to manage all of those things on different fronts. You have good bills, but then again, you have some people that want to do some other things to it and just, completely mess the whole doggone city up. But, another thing I wanted to ask you, right? I made a note what you said earlier about the schools, right? You had a bill, you did something for the schools. But my question is, right, say I'm a citizen, right, and I have an issue with the school curriculum. And if I say, hey, I have an issue with Memorial's curriculum, this is not doing our kids any good because they're on a dumbed down curriculum versus Groves, PNG and stuff like that. When they go to PNG, Port Nature's Groves, they can't compete, and so everybody knows they have a a deficit in the curriculum being taught, right? So, if you looking at if a job applicant looking at a student that has graduated from P&G versus Memorial, they're going to have the bias of getting a person with the P&G because they have a better, more strenuous school curriculum versus the curriculum that we have over here at Memorial. Now, as a parent, a citizen, is there a way that I can go to my state rep and have them try to look into having like a standard curriculum that's meeting on par with the other schools in the local area?
So how that goes, and I'm gonna just be 100% honest. I'm not that well versed in education, but what I do know is that the schools in all areas do have to meet a certain standard when it comes to education, and that's why I know sometimes when it comes to people saying, well, the testing isn't here, because that testing is what is considered the legal standard. Now, in order to change some of those situations on a state level as far as curriculum, that would have to be something that would be based, and from my remembrance, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I
Yeah, right. No
apologize,
problem. No
would
problem.
have to be from certain funds and resources would have to be able to come down. And this is, and I always try to tell people this, I don't get involved in in the schools and the city politics, because that's their arena. That's where people elect people, and I don't think it's fair to, I'm not going to criticize them just because that's not my arena. But as far as when
Right.
it comes to schools, there are certain curriculums changes that can be done, just like, for instance, with this critical race theory that is not
Yeah.
being taught here. We can set standards where things have to be generalized, but schools also have certain exemptions if there is a learning curve for their students, because of the fact that they don't have up-to-date books, or because that, the poverty line, different things of that sort. That can sometimes, that also will a lot of times sometimes take a factor into what happens. Because, like, for instance, and I know you know this, we have kids who don't eat until they come to school, and we have some, they're hungry as soon as they get to school. They need something to eat. And so it can be kind of tricky, but there are ways to kind of say standardize as far as in curriculum, yes, but the key important factor too is going to be boosting money into these areas, like our area, where we need teachers who are willing to stay. Like, for instance, I've said, I was looking into it actually this session. I was saying, maybe instead of just incentivizing teachers by giving them, if you stay 10 years, you can, get your student debt paid for. I said, well, why don't we let the federal government do that, and the state government can still come in and say things like, how about this? If you stay for 10 years, we'll pay for a house that is in a certain amount of money. Like, kind of like how we do with some of the projects we have after storms, when people's homes have been messed up and they build a new home. Give teachers incentives to not come here and not stay, but give them incentives to stay here. And then that way they can also be more heavily invested into the children's future. And the programs that they were trying to implement in the bill in 2019 was basically, it was fair, but going back still to what you said, it was, you get better scores, giving teachers incentives to teach more, but at the same point in time, we do also understand that some students still have books that are outdated throughout the state. And that's something that ultimately, what it comes down to, really, truly is funding. And as I tell some people, a budget is actually very easy when it comes to what the budget should be. Is just take however much money that you have in a month, in a year, and then divide that up to which bills you think are most important. And that's literally how everything is funded throughout the state.
Right.
Is who thinks what is important. And education, while everyone likes to talk about education, our communities are the ones who are always lacking in it. And it also sometimes takes away the fact that we get federal dollars, but if the state can show that oh, well, we can do this, but it's going to take us this long to get to Port Arthur. But they start out in the Katy ISD. You're like, why would it take you 5 years to get here when we're 2.5 hours away?
Right.
Why can't you implement it here, start from the bottom up? And unfortunately, the reason sometimes that happens with curriculums as well, going back still to what you're saying, is it really is truly all about leadership. And the people who are in most leadership positions, that form of education, they don't understand it because that's not the reality of their community. So they understand it, but because they don't constantly see it, and it's not something that they have to hear their children come home talking about, it's not a priority for them.
Right. Yeah, and absolutely, and that's a and that's a elephant. You know, it's going to definitely take more than one bite to go ahead and try to eat. With the education, especially over here in Port Arthur, and a lot of it is always leadership, in my opinion. You know, I'm saying, you know, locally too. So, you know, that's something, you know, we ain't gonna finish with this conversation right here, but yeah, man, it's a whole lot of facets in this stuff, and we just have to stay, you know, vigilant as citizens and, you know, reps, and being on top of it, brother. And I think those are some of all the questions that I have. Hopefully, you'll, you know, come join us in the future if you ever have anything or some, you know, other things change. And man, if you want to go ahead and give us like a closing statement or something like that, go ahead on, brother.
Well, real quick before I give a closing statement,
go ahead.
You made a statement about activism, and I also say it's funny. You can consider yourself an activist, but if someone was to pay an attorney, they would then be a lobbyist. So I always say activists are really both activists and lobbyists, because nobody can lobby your issue the way you can lobby it, no matter how much you pay them. So I would say you're kind of an activist lobbyist, because you do on both ends. You do it in your own spare time, which is your activism, but you lobby for that change. So I would say you can give yourself both titles because you do both things.
Okay.
But as far as just my closing speech to say, really simple is, my name is Christian Manuel, and I am running for state representative in District 22. I've done the job for the last 17 years. Legislation is what I have been eating, breathing, and sleeping since I was 18 years old. I know that I can't meet everyone, but I hope that everyone that I am able to meet, and I can meet as many people as possible, that I can show you all with my words that my actions, that my 17 years of service was not for naught, and that I am ready and willing to do the work if I can have the faith of the community, and I would appreciate it.
And then again, I want to go ahead and thank you for a very informative interview, right? Because I don't think there's too many people out there that brought that information to us like you have. And
well, I'm happy to do it.
And, you know, also to give us like a better understanding with the state representative's job and titles, and more information about the overall state representative job and everything that he does. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, brother. And I want to tell everybody, you're watching this, go ahead on and subscribe to the PA Political Revolution podcast. Until I do another one, peace.